Syria stands at a pivotal moment, its fate hanging in the balance after more than a decade of turmoil and transformation. The scars of civil war are still fresh, and the hopes for lasting peace remain fragile. On January 18, 2026, a new conflict erupts in the north and east, pitting the Syrian government under President Ahmed al-Sharaa against the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF. The fragile ceasefire that once held these regions together has shattered, plunging communities back into uncertainty. The government, determined to reassert control after years of war, pushes its army to reclaim lost territories, aiming to unify the country under Damascus. For President al-Sharaa and his supporters, restoring national sovereignty is not just a political goal, it is a matter of survival and pride. The SDF, once the West's key ally against ISIS, now defends its autonomous region and vision for a decentralized, democratic Syria. Their fighters, many of whom are women and ethnic minorities, see this struggle as a fight for dignity, self-determination, and the preservation of hard-won freedoms. This is not a simple battle of good versus evil, but a struggle over land, resources, and the future of the Syrian state. Oil fields, fertile farmland, and vital border crossings are all at stake, fueling the ambitions and anxieties of both sides. Both sides have legitimate, yet conflicting aspirations. The government's supporters rally for a unified Syria, while SDF backers demand recognition of their rights and autonomy. The streets echo with chants, and the air is thick with uncertainty. The government seeks unity and stability, hoping to restore order and rebuild a nation fractured by years of violence and foreign intervention. While the SDF fights to protect hard-won autonomy, determined to preserve their unique identity and the democratic experiment they have built in the northeast. As negotiations collapse and military operations intensify, the stakes for Syria's future, and the wider region, have never been higher. Civilians once again find themselves caught in the crossfire, forced to flee their homes as towns and villages become battlegrounds. We'll examine the roots of this confrontation, the breakdown of talks, and the international response as the fragile peace unravels. The world watches closely, aware that the outcome here could reshape alliances and power dynamics across the Middle East. Understanding this conflict is key to understanding the next chapter for Syria and the Middle East. The choices made now will echo for generations, shaping the destiny of millions and the future of an entire region. The seeds of today's violence were sown in the failed attempt to integrate the SDF into Syria's national army. Throughout 2025, both sides negotiated, Damascus demanding full control, the SDF insisting on autonomy and constitutional guarantees for Kurds. Talks broke down as neither side would compromise. The government saw SDF autonomy as a threat, while the SDF feared losing everything they'd built. The missed deadline for integration in late 2025 shattered hopes for peaceful reunification. Accusations of bad faith replaced dialogue, and the political standoff quickly turned military. The collapse of this plan marked the point of no return, transforming tense negotiations into open conflict. The dream of a unified Syrian army vanished, replaced by two rival forces now locked in battle. The arrival of the new year marked not just a change in the calendar, but a dramatic escalation in the conflict that had simmered for months across the Syrian plains. In a bold and calculated move, the Syrian army launched a major offensive, pushing deep into SDF-held territory, with overwhelming force and determination. The SDF, facing mounting pressure, announced a tactical retreat east of the Euphrates. This opened the door for government forces to surge forward, rapidly seizing towns and villages that had been under Kurdish administration for years. State media quickly broadcast triumphant images of troops entering key locations, while the SDF fiercely disputed many of the government's claims, especially over the strategically vital town of Tabqa, where both sides vied for control. Fighting erupted across multiple fronts, with artillery shells pounding the outskirts of villages and military convoys racing along highways to reinforce the front lines. The sound of distant explosions became a constant backdrop for those caught in the crossfire. The government's push was swift, highly coordinated, and relentless, commanders using detailed maps to plan each phase of the offensive, determined to seize as much territory as possible before international pressure or negotiations could halt their advance. For the SDF, the withdrawal quickly turned into a chaotic and contested retreat under heavy fire, with fighters scrambling to regroup and protect civilians fleeing the violence. For Damascus, this offensive was more than a military campaign. It was a chance to reclaim vital infrastructure, from power plants to water facilities. For the SDF, it became a desperate fight to hold on to their region, their homes, and their hard-won autonomy. The lines of control shifted by the hour, with drone footage revealing a patchwork of contested zones. Night after night, tracer fire illuminated the darkness, as the battle for Syria's north and east grew ever more intense and unpredictable. Both sides understood that what happened here would not only decide the fate of these plains, but would shape the future of Syria itself for years to come. At the heart of this conflict lies a battle for Syria's economic lifeblood, its oil and gas fields. The SDF controls most of the country's energy resources, funding their administration and independence from Damascus. As the army advances, it targets not just towns but oil fields, with state media celebrating each reclaimed asset as a national victory. For the government, regaining these resources is essential for reconstruction and survival under sanctions. The SDF, meanwhile, sees control of oil as vital to their autonomy and the well-being of their people. Neither side is willing to compromise, making the fight for places like Tabqa especially fierce. This struggle over resources is as decisive as the military one. Each side's future depends on it. For President al-Shara's government, the offensive is about restoring Syria's sovereignty and preventing fragmentation. Damascus frames the campaign as a move to reunite the country, re-establish state services, and ensure resources benefit all Syrians, not just one group. The SDF's autonomy is seen as a threat, a possible precedent for further division, and a challenge to central authority. The government also distrusts the SDF's ties to the US, viewing them as a proxy for foreign interests. Only a strong, centralized state, they argue, can rebuild Syria and prevent further chaos. For Damascus, compromise on sovereignty is not an option. Military action is the chosen path. For the SDF, this is a fight for survival and the democratic ideals they've built in the autonomous administration of North and East Syria. They see the government's advance as a return to the old regime's oppression, threatening hard-won rights and local governance. The SDF's system, with its councils and pluralism, stands in stark contrast to both ISIS and the Ba'athist state. Surrendering to Damascus would mean losing autonomy, risking persecution, and undoing years of progress. Control over local resources is crucial. They argue it funds schools, hospitals, and security for communities long neglected by the central government. The SDF demands constitutional guarantees for their autonomy and cultural rights, dismissing government gestures as insufficient. Until those guarantees are secured, they vow to resist, fighting for their future and their vision of a pluralistic Syria. Trust between the Syrian government and the SDF has collapsed, each side accusing the other of violating withdrawal agreements. The SDF claims Damascus exploited a planned pullback to launch a surprise offensive, seizing territory before their fighters could withdraw. This perceived betrayal has hardened SDF resistance, fueling their belief that negotiation is futile. The government counters that the SDF broke the deal first, ambushing army patrols and justifying a military response. Both sides now see themselves as victims, using these narratives to legitimize their actions and demonize the other. The cycle of accusation and counter-accusation has poisoned any hope for mediation. With trust shattered, the path to peace grows ever more distant. The United States, long the SDF's main backer in the fight against ISIS, now finds itself in a precarious position as its Kurdish-led ally comes under direct attack from the Syrian state. For years, American support has been the backbone of the SDF's campaign to keep ISIS at bay, but the shifting dynamics on the ground have left Washington facing a difficult dilemma. The alliance that once seemed straightforward is now fraught with new risks and uncertainties. American officials have urgently called for an immediate halt to the fighting, warning that renewed war could destabilize the entire region and create a dangerous opening for ISIS to regroup and launch new attacks. The U.S. government is deeply concerned that the fragile stability achieved over years of effort could unravel almost overnight. Behind the scenes, U.S. diplomats are scrambling to mediate, holding urgent meetings with SDF leaders and regional allies to coordinate a unified response. These high-stakes discussions are aimed at preventing further escalation and finding a path back to stability. But the options are limited, and the stakes are high. Yet Washington's leverage is limited. There's no formal relationship with Damascus, and direct military intervention is off the table. The U.S. must navigate a complex web of alliances and rivalries, all while trying to avoid a wider conflict that could draw in other regional powers. The U.S. now faces the challenge of balancing its support for the SDF with respect for Syria's territorial integrity, relying almost entirely on diplomatic pressure and back-channel negotiations to influence events on the ground. As the conflict escalates and violence spreads, America's influence and its ability to protect its embattled partner are being put to a severe test. The risks of miscalculation or unintended consequences are higher than ever. The world watches anxiously as the U.S. weighs its next move in a crisis with no easy answers, knowing that the decisions made in Washington could shape the fate of Syria and the region for years to come. Syria's future hangs in the balance as government and SDF forces clash over territory, resources, and competing visions for the nation. The government's drive for unity collides with the SDF's fight for autonomy, leaving little room for compromise. Strategic towns and oil fields remain flashpoints, and neither side appears ready to back down. Accusations of betrayal and broken agreements have poisoned the well for negotiations, making further bloodshed likely. The human cost mounts, and the risk of regional escalation grows. International efforts, especially from the U.S., may struggle to contain the crisis. The dream of a peaceful, post-war Syria remains elusive, as the country faces yet another uncertain and dangerous chapter. We'll continue to follow this story, bringing you updates as events unfold.